What is karma? It's a super important Buddhist idea, but often it's misunderstood. And in this talk, I'm going to explain what karma is, how mindfulness can help us to generate good karma and avoid bad karma, how going through hard times can actually help purify some of your bad karma, and a lot more. This talk is a recording of a live teaching that I did on Insight Timer, so if you want to find me there and join future live sessions live, see the link below. And also, in this video, I'm going to mention the Four Noble Truths and some videos I made about it. If you want to actually enroll in my free course by email on the Four Noble Truths, you'll also find a link for that below. I hope you enjoyed this mini workshop on the Buddhist teachings about karma. So the first thing I want to say about karma is that literally it means action. So when you hear the word, it's a Sanskrit word. The Pali word is kamma. So if you're practicing in a Theravadan tradition, you might hear kamma. If it's a Mahayana tradition or another tradition that comes from India and uses similar terminology, you probably see karma. It's a word that people use a lot. And it's a word that often people use maybe out of context, actually. So I see people use it as like luck or, you know, I did this thing, so I get that result sometimes. And obviously, doing a thing and getting a result that's related are very much part of the theory of karma, but that's not all there is to it. And I think also this theory of karma, I like to think of it as a theory because, you know, gravity is a theory and relativity is a theory. It's a way of thinking about the world and making sense of the world that allows us to figure out how to live better in it. So I'm gonna use this phrase, the theory of karma, the Buddhist theory of karma, because it does help us make predictions about the world and know how to live better and be able to think long-term into the future, which I want to talk about more towards the end of this conversation. But basically, the idea of karma in a Buddhist context is very old. If you've read anything or heard anything about the Four Noble Truths, and incidentally, I did a whole series of talks on the Four Noble Truths. You can find, I don't think I recorded them on Insight Timer, but you can find a series of teachings on the Four Noble Truths on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested, you can find, you know, if you go to my profile on Insight Timer, you can find a link to a page that's just for Insight Timer people. So you can find a link to my YouTube channel. You can watch all those videos. That's just kind of like a little context to say that the idea of karma and the idea that's very related of rebirth, those are both very ancient Buddhist ideas, and you see them in the oldest layers of Buddhist teachings, like the Four Noble Truths. So I'm going to guess probably a lot of y'all have heard of the Four Noble Truths or a little bit familiar. The first one is that there is just unsatisfactoriness involved in life if you're not enlightened. So it's a good motivation to get enlightened. But the second noble truth is that there is a cause for that unsatisfactoriness or suffering. And the second noble truth really is one place in Buddhism where you can find these teachings on karma. The third noble truth is that there is an end to all suffering, all unsatisfactoriness. Anything that is not bliss has an end to it. And then the fourth noble truth is the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's the path from where we are now, or at least where I am now, unenlightened existence, experiencing unsatisfactoriness or suffering. And in that Noble Eightfold Path shows us the way. It shows us the things to train in to actually arrive in a state that is beyond all suffering because we're in touch with our true nature, which Mahayana Buddhism calls Buddha nature. So that was a lot. But I just wanted to put a little context around the idea of karma because it's so important. So the second noble truth, the truth of why we suffer, is all about karma, really. It's because we take actions with a specific motivation. That's like the basic definition of karma. It's an action that you take with a motivation. And most of us want to be happy. In fact, probably all of us want to be happy. So we do things that we think are going to bring us happiness. And from a Buddhist perspective, a lot of the things that we do chasing after happiness are actually really not good for us in the long term. we create karma, but it's often not great karma. So for instance, there's, the idea of someone who goes into business. They want to be able to feed their family. Nothing wrong with that motivation. Maybe they get a little bit greedy though, and their motivation for their daily life, their daily tasks becomes getting as much as possible. Maybe they start cheating their customers a little bit, or making claims that aren't 100% true about their products, or just like starting to get engaged in some shady dealings. So in that case, this person wants what they think is happiness. They want money. They want more of it. They feel like they don't have enough. They need to get some more so that they'll be able to provide for their family or have the life they want, or I don't know, upgrade to a bigger house or car, or whatever. So, but that motivation of there's not enough, I want what I need, I'm going to get it, I don't really care who else has to go without, I don't really care if my actions hurt other people, that is not a great karmic motivation. So, like the inside of Buddhism, really, the story of the night that the Buddha became enlightened, a big part of that story is that the Buddha, well, at that point, he wasn't quite enlightened yet, so he was still Prince Siddhartha, but like this person who was about to become the Buddha saw into what happens as beings are born and die. So the idea, the fundamental idea of karma in a Buddhist context is that we live lifetime after lifetime and we create karma in every one of those lifetimes, but we don't remember our previous lives. Or at least most people don't. Even kids who remember previous lives tend to remember only one. So if 5 or 10 lifetimes ago, I did something really terrible because at the time I thought it was going to lead me to where I wanted to go. Maybe I killed some people, or, stole everything that a poor widow had and she starves to death over the winter, or something like that, like some really terrible action. When I experience the results of it in this lifetime, I don't remember having done the action that set that karma in motion. I just know, maybe my house got hit by a tornado and now I'm left with nothing. Or some other terrible thing has happened to me. So the theory of karma is that I set that in motion however many lifetimes ago, and now it's come to fruition. I like to think of karma sometimes as like throwing something up in the air. But it's sort of like you're throwing it up in the air in maybe a moving train or something. Like you're moving along in time. We tend to think we're going to throw something up and it's just going to come right back down. And if nothing comes down, then, maybe nothing happened or our actions didn't have any effect. But actually, like we're moving along. We toss something up. There's no telling if that thing is going to come down soon or later or hundreds of lifetimes from now. So the Buddha's insight was to see how karma connects cause and result. To see people lifetime after lifetime creating causes and then experiencing the results of those causes. It's almost like physics. It really is like, you throw something up and there's no telling when it's going to come down. There's no telling what shape it's going to take when it comes down. It may not look anything like the original thing that you threw up in the air. The action you did with a certain motivation, say it was a good motivation. This is part of the teaching on karma too. The results of that action taken with a good motivation, even if it was very small, the results can be huge. So probably all of us at one time or another have said some kind word to someone, or, done something we thought was just such a small gesture, it almost doesn't even matter. And then you find out later it had a huge impact on someone. Maybe it shifted their life, the way that their day was going. It made them have a good day instead of a bad day. Maybe it planted a seed, and that seed in their mind, blossomed into the career that they're in now, or a product that they came up with because they had this idea, because of our conversation. So you just don't know what's going to come from every action that you do. And the reason that's like a fundamental insight, a game-changing insight, is that if we think stuff just happens randomly or for no reason, or that we can put our actions out into the world, but they're not necessarily going to come back on us, then we don't understand like the equation. You can think of karma almost as, I mentioned it's kind of like physics. It's almost like there's an equation. There's an input and then it goes out into the world. So in the example of just doing a small kind act for someone, you don't know what chain of events that's going to put into place. These random acts of kindness, like buying a coffee for the person behind you in line at Starbucks, or, you just don't know how that's going to ripple out into the world. But it does. Every action has its ripples that go out. Sometimes they're kind of, neutral, they're boring, or they're bland, or they don't really change anything that deeply. But sometimes they really do have this big impact on ourselves, on others. Think of how many times, like, true confession here, like I personally have texted while I've been driving. And, usually it's when I'm on a highway and there's no other vehicles around, or, when I'm at a stoplight or something like that. But every time I've made the decision to check my texts or to try and send a text while I'm driving, it's only been good luck so far that no crash has happened. Imagine, that you take some small action like that. Just, I just want to see what somebody, if somebody has replied to me yet, and then you crash into someone, you change your life, you change someone else's life. So again, it's, the concept of karma is not necessarily that the results of an action are predictable, but every action has results. And basically, if you think about it, we're all going through our days creating all kinds of, karma that we're putting out into the world all day long. And this is where I want to shift over into the second part of this conversation, which is about mindfulness and how that is actually a huge tool to help us be more intentional about karma. I just want to pause though and say, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in chat and I'll address them. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can still write a question in the comments and I'll reply as soon as I can. So I want to also kind of put mindfulness into a different context here. I know a lot of us are familiar with mindfulness in the sense of, using it to relax, to calm down, to deal with stress, all of which is wonderful. I'm a huge fan of using mindfulness in that context. But I want to tell you there's another really important context as well for mindfulness in the Buddhist tradition. And that is that mindfulness is how you can notice your motivation for what you're doing all day long. It's how you can actually try to shift your karma from just putting out random stuff, trying to get what you want, not really caring about other people, to noticing, oh, I feel that grabby, greedy feeling inside myself. I need to be careful about what I do. Or you can feel that motivation, even if you're just doing something that seems totally mundane, you can feel your motivation for doing it and try to make it positive. So for instance, if you go to a fast food place and you're driving through just getting some food, as you're paying that person, maybe you can cultivate some gratitude. Or if it's your job to be the one giving people food, maybe you can cultivate generosity. So with mindfulness, if you think about it in the context of karma, then mindfulness becomes a very powerful tool for not just shaping who we are right now, but beginning to consciously shape who we want to be in the future. This, I think, is one of the big, neglected areas of benefit from mindfulness, because most of us, I think, honestly, don't think that much about karma in daily life. We definitely don't think about it in the context of meditation practice, and we definitely don't think about it in the context of future lives. But all of those contexts from a Buddhist perspective are totally relevant to the discussion of karma. So Raven asked, is it just outward actions, or do thoughts we don't share with others create karma? Yeah, so this is a really good question. And the answer is, from a Buddhist perspective, there's karma of body, speech, and mind. So for instance, if I have a hateful thought, there's the karma of having a hateful thought. If I actually say something really mean and nasty to somebody, it's a heavier karma. If I take that hatred and I put it into action verbally, I'm setting off more of a chain reaction. If I take that action and I do something physically, like I walk up and punch somebody or like harm them or key their car or whatever, it's yet another, I was about to say it's even more serious. I think it depends, with verbal karma, it depends on what you say. Like you can say something really hurtful to somebody, whereas if you had just walked up and like smacked them in the face, it would have hurt, they would have been upset, but they would have gotten over it sooner. So I don't want to say, something you think can't be heavily negative or have like really negative effects. But I think in general, having a passing thought that's maybe full of hatred is not considered as heavy a karma as something that you actually put out into the world. But having said that, if we think about karma in maybe a more subtle way, it's not just sort of like an action that goes out into the world externally necessarily. I like to think of karma also. I mentioned sort of tossing something up and then something else falls down later. There's a rule of cause and effect. You've put something in motion and sooner or later it's going to come back to you. You can also think about karma in terms of the ripples that spread out over a lake. So like if you imagine, a pretty serene, peaceful lake and you throw a stone into it and the ripples spread out, you can also think of it that way. Because every time you take an action, even if it's just a mental action, even if it's just a thought, you're laying down tracks in your mind, so to speak, that will make it more likely that you do the same thing in the future. And again, this is where mindfulness is so important because, say that I am having all these, I keep using like negative examples. I'm going to use a positive example. Like say that I'm having just these wonderful thoughts, like, oh, I really appreciate my sister. She's so kind. She's done these things for me. If I recognize, oh, I'm having positive thoughts, then you can hold those thoughts in your mind. You can think them, with not just the motivation. I mean, usually we don't even think about a motivation. We don't even have like a conscious motivation. Thoughts just come up. But if you see that thought coming up and you want to encourage it, like, oh, wow, that's loving kindness. I like feeling this way. I want to cultivate more of it toward, my sister. And then maybe even like I'm feeling this toward my sister. I'm just going to imagine feeling this way toward everyone. What would it feel like for me if I loved everyone? And you have a little moment of loving kindness and it lays down that path in your mind that says, oh yeah, we can do this. This is easy. And it feels good. Why would I not do this again? Does it make sense? Like, the reason karma is so powerful is that we habituate to what we do. So when we notice what we are doing mentally, verbally, physically, then we can get intentional about it. People talk about controlling your mind. You can't control your mind. Your mind is going to do what it does. But, say that you have like some really hateful thought that comes up in your mind, you don't have to feed it. And I think sometimes when we talk about karma and the mind or what happens internally, sometimes people get a little bit freaked out like, oh my gosh, I just had this thought and it's really negative. Like, oh, that's creating bad karma. What am I going to do? I'm screwed. Like I have all this bad karma. But I don't think that's actually the way it works. Like from a Tibetan perspective, to fully generate like a complete karmic act, you have to have the intention, you have to do the act, you have to know that you did it, and afterwards be happy about that act. So say that you're just kind of thinking negative thoughts about other people, it's not a fully formed karmic act. So the more we can just notice thoughts and let them flow through and only cultivate the thoughts we want, the more we're beginning to actually shape our karma. So Syl asked a really important question. Is there a way to fix bad karma? And then Jamie also says, I feel like relationships is where I receive bad karma. At this moment, every single thing is working out so well. Challenging, trying to look at this and understand. Okay, so I wanna first talk about Syl's question, and then maybe kind of distinguish two different ways of using karma between what Syl is asking and what Jamie's asking. Oh, yes. Raven says, I tend to feel guilty when I start thinking negatively, so this is helpful. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think we take too much ownership of our thoughts sometimes. Stuff randomly passes through your mind. It's when you feed that thought that it becomes karmically powerful. Oh, so Jamie says, in every other area except relationships, everything is working well. That's what she meant. Okay, so getting back to Syl's question, is there a way to fix bad karma? This is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, Syl. I wanted to talk about it, but yeah, I'm glad to have it kind of highlighted. So basically, the simplest answer to like fixing bad karma, I guess this does kind of connect with Jamie's question, is that when bad karma ripens for you and you have bad experiences, you recognize like, oh, this is coming because in some previous life, some being who wasn't really even me did something and now I'm experiencing the result. And if I can understand it that way and not generate more bad karma, because of this, then I've purified that karma. It's come up for me. It's unpleasant. I've experienced that, the fruition of whatever I did earlier, and now it's done. And I don't have to keep making more bad karma as a result of that. So you can think about this. There's a lot of different ways to think about it. But if we think in terms of relationships, well, okay, sorry. I want to back up. I want to distinguish between karma in the sense of what I do and put out into the world, and karma in the sense of what I experience. So from a traditional Buddhist perspective, almost everything we experience in life, I walk outside and a bird poops on my head or, somebody wins the lottery. Like these things that just seem almost random and uncontrollable, they're the results of our earlier actions. So this is a little bit confusing. Karma, people can say karma and it can mean what you're doing or what you're receiving as a result of previous actions. So the obvious way to clear up bad karma is when bad things happen to you, to understand them in that context of like, okay, this is ripening for me now. Maybe it's because of something I did earlier today or previously in this lifetime. It could be something I did 500 lifetimes ago. And sooner or later, that karma has to ripen. It's ripening now. I'm just going to take it on the chin. And once this is done, I've finished that karma. And because I recognize this came from doing something that was hurtful to me or other people in the past, I'm intentionally going to try and create something positive to kind of counterbalance that. So if you think about karma, we've talked about throwing stuff up, like tossing something into the air in terms of creating the karma. Now stuff is coming back down on us. And I feel like any reminder we get that karma is operative, that we're constantly creating causes, it's such a huge reminder to go and create some positive causes. So, something terrible happens to you. Most of us are not immediately going to think like, oh, I want to go out and try and do a little bit of Dharma practice, or I want to think something positive. I want to cultivate generosity or forgiveness or patience. Usually we want to make the bad stuff stop. If we are putting it on someone else, we want to make them stop doing it to us, or we want to get revenge on them or something. So if we can put those reactions aside, consciously try and cultivate something positive instead, then we're just burning off that bad karma. The other way to answer Syl's question, the other way that you can kind of get rid of bad karma, like in the Tibetan tradition, there's a whole practice around this, but I'm going to assume probably nobody has a background in that particular practice. But the basics of it are, it's called Vajrasattva. It's a Buddha who's related to purification. And the basic aspect of that practice is to bring to mind the stuff we wish we hadn't done. So like negative actions we've said, maybe like things we've done to other people that were hurtful, even just a way of thinking about ourselves or a way of thinking about others. And this next part is really important. We bring it to mind, but not with guilt, not with shame. We're not thinking, I'm so bad, I can't do anything right. It's not that. It's noticing, man, I wish I hadn't done that. I did this thing, it had this bad impact on me. This is not who I want to be. It's not who I am. And by noticing this thing I did, regretting having done it and making an aspiration not to do it again, it really reduces the power of that thing over us. So I said earlier, you can think about karma almost as like a habit. It lays down tracks in our mind and we're going to keep doing that thing. So when you notice something you've done and you really don't want to keep repeating that pattern, and you make a real intention not to, and instead to do something positive, it can start it's like the fast way to erase the tracks we've been laying down and to try and make other ones instead. And again, I want to bring this back to mindfulness. Mindfulness is how we can notice when we're following in the tracks of bad karma and choose something different. If we're not even paying attention to what we're doing or what we're thinking, what we're feeling, we're going to just create whatever karma we're already in the habit of creating. We have no agency. But when we start to notice what we're doing and to be intentional about what we're doing, and I find it helpful, honestly, even to think about karma in this context. Like right now I have the opportunity to choose. Who do I want to be 5 years from now? Who do I want to be 10 years from now? Okay, I want to be probably a kind person, a person who is kind to myself, a person who's generous, a person who's clear-hearted. So which of these two paths that I'm about to take right now is going to lead me to that future self that I want to be? So that too is very much related to karma. We're laying down the tracks. We're throwing stuff up into the air that's going to come back for our future selves, and we want to be giving our future selves gifts. It's like investments. We're putting something good out into the world so that in the future we get something good back in return. So now I want to just address Jamie's question, relationships are where you receive bad karma. Well, I think there's a really powerful reason for that. We're all just so deeply connected to each other. And we feel like our happiness or unhappiness, is because of some other person, or if they would act differently, or they want us to act differently. And I think relationships are an area where a lot of us, bump up against the parts of ourselves maybe we're not super proud of, or the parts of other people, honestly, too, that maybe they're not doing super well with. And karma that we create within relationships, from a Buddhist perspective, they can span multiple lives. So another aspect of karma is that whoever we're really connected with in this lifetime, from a Buddhist perspective, odds are we're going to be connected with them again in the next lifetime. So sometimes trouble in relationships could be from things that didn't even start in this lifetime. Maybe several lifetimes ago, the person who's now your mom used to be your best friend, and you had a falling out and it was never repaired in that lifetime. And so in this lifetime, it's like, you're thrown back together again. Can you work it out this time? And I think being able to see challenges in relationships in the light of, this may have been going on for a long time, and this is my chance to put an end to it. That can be helpful. Jamie says, it's exhausting, LOL. Yes. At the end of the day, though, what are we here for? it's kind of relationships. So it's the hard part, but it's also the juicy part. And I know we're out of time. We could talk a lot more about, karma in relationships. But I think, again, relationships are a really clear aspect of life where karma can show up, because we're constantly, if it's a close relationship, everything you do with that other person is bouncing off their karma. It's like your karmic patterns and their karmic patterns can just really get woven together. And if it's good, it can be great. And if it's bad, it can be really bad. But again, to kind of connect back to what Sil was saying, can we put an end to the bad stuff? And it's not easy. That's a whole realm unto itself. Probably therapy is more, appropriate for that realm. But from a Buddhist perspective, even encountering the negative stuff, it's like you now have an opportunity to fix it, whether it's in a relationship or in your personal life, which kind of connects to what Ursula just said. Does it make sense to be grateful for difficult experiences? Yes, actually. Like in the Tibetan tradition, there's a whole sort of genre of reflections on being grateful for illness and for when people don't treat you well. And, what we think of as the negative circumstances of life, first of all, because we're burning off bad karma. And then the other thing is it can act as a wake-up call. Especially if it's like a situation that I got myself into and I know it's because I did something that wasn't, particularly kind or thoughtful of me. It's an opportunity to notice the bad effects and to try and do something different. And it's easy to say that. It's not easy to live it. But yes, absolutely, difficult situations. I mean, look at the world right now, COVID-19 and the Delta variant and just everything that's happening. It's a lot to live through. And if we take it as kind of the culmination of our collective karma, then it's an opportunity, to burn that off and to try and find a better way of living going forward. I know we're over time. This is supposed to be about half an hour. We're about 34 minutes right now. But I just want to thank you so much for tuning in, for learning about karma. It's so important. And I hope if you don't take anything else away, you take away the idea that karma, it's really a set of teachings on how we can design our future life. It's like Buddhist investment advice. Oh my gosh. I should make a talk or a video just about that. You're investing in your future happiness. And the other side of it is mindfulness is like your best tool to choose what you're investing. Mindfulness is like putting deposits in the bank when you recognize opportunities to cultivate, patience, kindness, generosity. And there's so many opportunities for that right now. I'm from the US, there's all these invitations to, cultivate patience with people who disagree with us, to cultivate loving kindness for people who have a different perspective. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Sil. Thank you for suggesting this. This is also Vivek's idea. And these people I'm mentioning, Sil and Vivek and Ursula and Jamie and Pat is the one who I think requested this teaching. They're all in my circle on Insight Timer, which is called Buddhist Wisdom, Modern Life. You're welcome to go and join and ask questions if you have more questions or request a future teaching. I'm also going to put this talk on my YouTube channel. And for those who weren't here in the beginning, if you go to my Insight Timer profile page, there's a link to a page on my website. And that website page has a link to my YouTube channel. And I forgot to mention this, but I have a podcast. You'll find a link to it. And I actually talk about the 6 realms of rebirth in Buddhism in my podcast, Letting Grow. So you can find that if you're interested in rebirth. And a couple of people have donated. I want to thank Connie and Jamie for their donations. I also want to say, for some reason on Insight Timer right now, I can't thank people for their donations in the app. I don't know why, but I appreciate your support. It's really meaningful, and it helps to support Insight Timer. It helps to support us as teachers on here. So thank you so much. I hope that you can go out, create some great karma, burn off some bad karma today. All right, bye y'all.